Okay, vamos regar negócio. All right, so I will just start with introducing the session. All right, so welcome everyone. Sorry for this mess.
One more thing before you start. Can you maybe turn on the video camera so people can see you, the video camera of the computer? Because now we can only see the audience.
I know.
And a white wall.
Can you see me now?
Yeah, wonderful. Yeah.
Okay, good. Thank you very much for coming today. I'm Manon Cohen, working at POLIS Network. Welcome to this UVAR Box final conference. So as you have noticed, we have people online. And my colleague Nicholas is monitoring the chat and everything that is happening online. And I'm taking care of the presentations and everything that happens here. I think if you have questions in the room, you just raise your hands, and questions on the chat will be monitored by Nicholas. Maybe Pedro, you want to present the agenda. So I will now leave the floor to the project coordinator, Pedro Bernardes.
Thank you, Manon. Good morning, everyone. So I have the honor to give you the welcome words to a city that means a great deal to me. It's always good to come to Brussels. It's always good to come to Polis, and thank you for the opportunity also to host the final conference. I have to say, as welcoming words, that I'm very proud of what the consortium and this project has been able to produce. And with that, also very grateful for every consortium member, every single person that has somehow contributed to this outcome, successful outcome. In very different conditions throughout this past 2 years, where everything went digitally suddenly. And even though with the professionalism from everyone, I think we are able today to present you a very interesting project, hopefully with some ideas for continuing pursuing some of the objectives, the overall objectives of the project, dealing with sustainability on transport, helping the cities on their digitalization programs, dealing with traffic regulations and dynamic traffic regulations. So all of this is part of the things that we've touched upon with this UVAR Box project. UVAR stands, for those who don't know, for urban vehicle access regulations. And what we intend to provide you with this final conference today is first give you an overview of where we were in terms of reference to start with 2 years ago, our plan as we saw it then, and then our work plan carried out throughout these 2 years, and organized in work packages. So along today, you will see through the agenda that we will be setting the scene with a short presentation on my part, and then work package by work package, we will go into the details of what was really achieved and produced throughout these 2 years. So that's all for me in the welcoming words. Thank you again for those who have traveled here to Brussels. Thank you to all of those who have registered and are following us online via the web. Thank you.
Thank you.
Back to you, Manon.
Okay, thank you very much. And now we will leave the floor to Jürgen Kettner from the European Commission.
Thank you so much. Well, good morning, dear colleagues. You might wonder who is standing now in front of you, because you don't know me, because I'm a newcomer to DG Move. I'm coming from the world of EU external relation, where I've worked more than 20 years in EU delegations and also in headquarters dealing with transport. And you can imagine also urban mobility in the EU external context is gaining lots of weight, and so lots of cooperation programs are being developed. Just to give you an idea that urban mobility is not only issue for EU internal context, it's gaining importance as well in the external context. But coming back now to this conference, I really would like to thank you for giving me the opportunity to make some opening remarks on behalf of the European Commission at this important UVAR Box conference. As I said, I'm a newcomer, and this, means that I have to learn a lot, and I'm happy to do this together with you and become as operational as possible in a short time. And it also allows me to look at it with a fresh look, which is sometimes also quite helpful. But now let's come to the task at hand. And as you are aware, UVARs, the whole notion of UVARs, urban access regulation, forms a very important element of the 2021 new urban mobility framework of the European Commission. Okay, and because the UVARs is one key element to address air pollution and to address congestion as well. On top of that, UVAR has this massive impact if applied properly, that it can incentivize the use of public transport. It can push active mobility, working as well, walking and bicycles and all this contributes to road safety, very important in the urban context in Europe. And at the end of the day, it will contribute to the behavioral change of the people. Okay, because it doesn't come from today to tomorrow that people change. People need to accept what is happening and understand what is happening. And at the end of the day, it indeed contributes to the implementation of the EU Green Deal, which is, of course, importance for the European Commission. On the other side, as we have learned, there is no one-size-fits-all model for these UVARs. And UVARs have to be integrated at the end of the day in a broader set of measures. An UVAR will not work if you look at it in isolation. Okay. So, and to be honest, when I went through all these documents I had to read over the last 2 months, I was getting lost, and to see how many different types of UVARs and different regulation and I exaggerate obviously, and the different ways the cities are tackling it, are basically available on the spot. Please don't get me wrong, this is just something which I perceived. And and in order to be efficient, those UVARs have to be integrated in the overall context, the so-called sustainable mobility plans, which cities should develop to put their mobility on a sustainable footing. So, and when you look at UVARs, I think from what I've learned, there are some 4 aspects which are key, which trigger this change process. And one is governance and financing of the UVAR as such. Then we have the user needs and acceptance of those, the beneficiaries. Then, very important, the supporting mobility concepts. What can we offer to basically push and pull? And ensuring the compliance, which is obviously key. And it is important that whenever UVARs are deployed, that they allow for a seamless and user-friendly travel across the single market without leading to discrimination of non-resident drivers. And this brings me to the flip side of the coin, ladies and gentlemen. Because the diversity and the variety of UVARs applied at the moment under the different legislations across European cities poses indeed challenges to the internal market. When you connect the cities to the transport corridors, and if you believe it or not, I'm at my unit, by the way, working with Isabel van Don in her team, the number of complaints we receive from citizens, since I'm there since July, we believe it is really increasing. And there are people who are complaining. They said, we don't know, we are not aware. And, you know, of course, you're wondering, everybody uses mobile phones and everything, but still, you know, there are apparently a considerable number of people, of citizens, of road users who travel and who complain, you know, about the system. They don't know, they have to pay, they are fined, blah, 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 and so on and so on. So this is really an interesting, and this should be our motivation, really, to do something. The question is now how to improve the situation towards more efficiency, user-friendliness, and fair solution, both for the public authorities, for the vehicle drivers and the owners. And this is basically where the UVAR Box project kicked in since September 2020, Pedro, with regard to the successful digitization and exchange of UVAR data across Europe in these 5 countries who were working in, to facilitate the public, the private, public, and commercial use of UVARs. And please allow me now, first of all, to congratulate on the work done, because this is really impressive what you've done and achievements you have made under this UVAR Box project. And I don't want, let's say, to focus on another project, but we from the Commission, we see your project together with UVAR Exchange really as fundamental pillars, and they have to work in complementarity. UVAR Exchange builds on a lot what UVAR Box has created, but this will be very important, particularly with regard to the way forward. So, and as I said, yeah, for the Commission, sustainability is key. And I really repeat this, sustainability is key, not only for the EU external context, but only particularly for the EU internal context. Therefore, it will be really essential now, talking from today to the next months, years, weeks to come, that we have a strategy on hand on sustaining the achievements after the project ends. And we had already some preliminary talks with Pedro and the team. You know, with regard to applying the toolbox, the UVAR Box toolbox, ranging from the data structure, from the software tool, from, you know, you name it, and you know it much better than I do. And yeah, having said that, I'm really looking forward to the outcome of this conference, where I hope that we can jointly have ideas based on what Pedro and colleagues will present to really pave the way forward towards a sustainable application in the future. You know, with all the problems arising from, let's say, the NAP side, from maybe DG growth side on the single digit gateway. So there are a lot of options available, and I think finding the right way is not easy. I find it honestly as a newcomer really complex, but that's why we are here. That's why we are here, also to support our European citizens, to make cities more livable. And indeed, thanks again for giving me now these 5 minutes to speak. And I wish us all a successful day, and looking forward to continue working with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for this inspirational speech. And now Pedro Bagadesh will present the overview of the project.
Well, while Manuel is putting up the slides, let me just explain a little bit to the audience, either here physically or following us online. I will do a very short overview of the project, followed by 2 presentations. One on 2 of the most important outcomes of this project. One is based on the data model itself, a DataX2 profile for UVAR data. That is going to be explained, but we have stored a few minutes after this presentation for a Q&A. So please feel free to interact with us. Your feedback, either online or here presential, is very important for us to take up as notes or comments or suggestions of improvement to again consider while fine-tuning the final reports. The same applies for another presentation that will follow the data model, which will be the user-friendly tool. So the complexities of the data model are then streamlined and made hopefully as easy and user-friendly as possible to the authorities, the ones that are issuing these UVAR schemes from a regulatory point of view. They will find all the complexity of the data model in the back office of the application. In the front office, they find a web-based friendly user tool that they need to follow and fill in the forms to complete and provide the information about the UVAR scheme they are issuing. So city authorities, regions, even national authorities can do that hopefully as friendly as with user friendliness as much user friendliness as possible. And again, we have stored a couple of minutes at the end of the session for a brief Q&A. So please be aware, it can be a little bit tricky, it can be a little bit techy, but try and follow up. And if you have suggestions, if you have room for questions, please go forward and share them with the audience and the consortium. We'll be happy to take them. So with that, okay, 50-50, okay, I got the right button. So where were we 2 years ago? We had the terms of reference published by the European Commission. We understood, tried to perceive as best as possible what was the objective by then that the European Commission was pushing through. And I think you have expressed really well what was the intention back then and what was the, and still is today, the actual life and the complexity of the many UVAR schemes that are being published in every city in Europe, but with very lacking in terms of harmonization, lacking in terms of understandable from the public's point of view, and leading to a lot of misunderstandings and complaints that unfortunately are increasing over time, but that have to do pretty much with things that we've been able to identify as cultural subtleties, local methodologies that are applied a little bit without any sense of trying to provide an harmonized approach, European approach. And this was the starting point, more or less the starting point of the challenge, to try and provide an overview, a European overview of harmonized UVAR structure, hopefully digitally, so machine readable as well, that could be used as a way to tackle this issue and actually provide not only accurate information, but as much as possible, real-time travel information, either pre-trip or on-trip, by reusing that generated machine-to-machine data in mobile applications to the end users. So all of this has a very long and complex value chain, and the work packages that were designed to tackle each one of these challenges were then defined. And I will try to give you an overview of how that looks like or looked like in our proposal and then throughout the project. So this was the starting point. You have UVAR schemes that are usually related to a geographical perimeter in the city, an area of the city where often you have either time restrictions to be there or not to be there, where you have certain types of vehicles that are allowed or not allowed during those periods. And some of these UVAR schemes come with a fee. The parking is the most often known as example. If you can stay in that area, but with a price tag. From the process point of view, all of this is done in paper. So these are regulations issued by public authorities. They are made publicly available in local language or national language, either via a paper version or a PDF version, then made publicly available on the website. And all sorts of schemes we can find. We try to focus from the terms of reference on the ones that you can see here on the left-hand side. As I said, the regulations can be issued local, regional, national, or EU-wide, and they may be static or dynamic. The static, and the ones that we focused on throughout the project, the pedestrian zones, the parking regulations, the congestion charge, low emission zones, and limited access conditions, but also looking at dynamic examples. And I think this will be the trend for the future. The dynamic congestion charge, the dynamic low emission zone that can be triggered under specific conditions, whether that's coming from environmental sensors or others. Those restrictions of access can be triggered dynamically and digitally. So this was the starting point, and then moving forward, what we intended, or what the Commission challenged us to provide, was a digital harmonized approach to this landscape, where we would streamline the process of issuing these regulations, not only for people to read, but also for machines to be able to interact with. So even if we look further ahead in time with automated vehicles, somewhere along those years, these rules need to be digitized, need to be converted into machine readable formats that computers, onboard computers, digital travel planners have to take into account these restrictions and provide the best information to the user, rerouting or advising him to take other more sustainable options of transport, like a train, a public transport, a bus, a bicycle, hopefully, and park their car outside these areas. So this was the challenge, to streamline the process, to harmonize the data, and to come up both with the digital machine-to-machine readable formats and again, a coherent version for people to read and understand as possible, made available as possible in as many languages as there are in Europe. So this linked a little bit with the single digital gateway regulation as well. So there was, and there is, an alignment from the data model with these two types of requirements. On one hand, from the ITS directive, where we based the data model in DataX2, which is the standard for exchanging data, but again, building up the same data model for ensuring interoperability with the requirements from the single digital gateway, so that the DataX can be converted into English, Portuguese, Spanish, in short sentences, understandable sentences, made available publicly through your Europe portal or anywhere else in the web. So we wanted to deal with the data model first, and then a user-friendly tool without the complexity, without taking the complexity of the data model to the ones using and issuing these regulations. We wanted to have a web-based interface in an open source tool that anyone can use freely without any charges, to be able to, in their city, draw or edit the shapefile that the restrictions are referring to, and then provide the information, the detailed information about the regulations, the conditions of access to that area as they go along. Also, monitoring is and the triggering conditions can be made possible, and this was a mock-up that we presented earlier on in the early stage of what that could look like. So you will see that it has a map and it has some buttons, but everything else is completely different. So this will be a little bit our morning today. In the end, the output of after using the tool, after creating the digital UVAR scheme, we expect the data to be generated, the UVAR scheme to be generated and made available, hopefully through the national access points in DataX2 standard format, that service providers can then take up and provide digitally to end users through their mobile applications or web applications. So we, throughout the project, also took huge efforts towards communication and sustainability strategies that I'm going to speak a little bit in the next slides. But with the help of one thing that we've been able to put in place, which is the country coach board, which are extremely important features in the project, not technically, but human features related to the network, getting in touch with the people, the authorities, the service providers, the NAP community, the end users, the testers. All of this was made throughout these 2 years to ensure that not only the data model is fit for purpose, but actually the data generated is also fit for purpose to provide accurate real-time travel information to the end user. So in a nutshell, 2 more slides, and I think I'm already exhausting my time, so sorry for the delay. But 2 more slides, just bear with me. This is a kind of a slide that shows the 5 work packages of our project. The first one on the left is about the UVAR data model definition. This was work package 1, where, as I explained, we had to come up with a DataX2 profile for UVAR data. Work package 2 immediately followed up with the UVAR data generation. So the aim was to build up this tool, this web-based user-friendly tool, to make sure that embedded with the data model, authorities, public authorities, non-experts in DataX would be able to generate the data in these formats. Again, a third work package on the UVAR data provision that links with the service providers and also with the NAP, the National Access Points community, to provide access and conditions for the reusability of the data generated by the authorities that issued these regulations, and ultimately to provide accurate real-time travel information as perceived in the ITS directive and the delegated regulations to end users. Horizontally, as I said, there are many important human factors from the consortium. The communication and outreach strategy that was, I think, a key element to bind in all of these elements together, test it, to get their feedback, continuous feedback to the technical teams that were being fed, and improving the tools, improving the data models to make sure that we could take as much information as possible and try to come up with the most mature pilot as possible at the end, was ensured by this network of people that, as I said, I'm really grateful to be part of in this consortium, and to whom I really thank the huge efforts that were taken throughout the 2 years on this outreaching community, providing information about the complex topic, but also bringing in the comments and the inputs from the ones that ultimately will use these tools. So a special thank you to this country coaches board. These are very, very special persons. They're experts in the field. They are very well-known people locally. They have the ability to facilitate the network with the ones that are using or reusing, the ones that are using the tool or reusing the data that is being generated. And again, horizontally, the sustainability strategy was another key element. So as I said, work package 5, the communication outreach strategy with the country coaches, and work package 4 was aimed to present the sustainability strategy for the long-term vision of the project. So how can we build up from a 5 pilot member state projects to a European EU-wide approach? And would these tools be fit? What would be the challenges? Validation of data, publication of data, reusability of data, interoperability between the NAPs. Many of the questions that came throughout the discussions are then streamlined and presented with the sustainability strategy here on work package 4. So without any words or to present you, but in pictures, which I think facilitates a very complex data model on your left, a user-friendly tool in the middle, and you get the services on the left. Again, supported with a communication outreach strategy, the country coaches, and a sustainability strategy to make sure the data is updated and valid and can be actually used in real-time services. So this is a kind of a final screenshot of what I've already described. but in bullets. So the EU-wide provision of information, accurate, up-to-date, and continuous EU-wide real-time traffic information was an objective, with the support of the cities to streamline and simplify the digital procedure of issuing these schemes by means of, again, the adequate machine-readable formats. Of course, latex comes as a requirement from the EU regulation in terms of ITS. And we would pilot this in 5 member states: Austria, Belgium, Germany, Italy, and the Netherlands, who were tireless supporting the project, again, with the support of the country coaches and the communication strategy for awareness raising at national, regional, and local initiatives. Again, also, I think a big thank you is also in line for the European Commission for providing support to us throughout this communication strategy. They were there every time we had a webinar, every time we organized a workshop, every time there was a European ITS Congress. They would make their stand available for us to be there half an hour presenting the outcomes and the status of our projects. So a big thank you to the support also from the European Commission. And this is my last slide. So we kicked off in August 2020, the inception report and the communication strategy. A year ago, we've published the interim report where we have accomplished the data model UVAR profile, fit for purpose, also with the requirements from the single digital gateway. We organized 5 capacity building webinars, provided a UVAR Box tool package and the development report to provide support to the cities using these tools, so documentation and a lot of other technical documentation. And we are now in September presenting the final report with we had in between the organization of a hackathon that was organized and presented in Toulouse during the ITS Congress. We have now completed our testing the integration of the UVAR data access in navigation services. We've been able to create more than 500 digital UVAR schemes across the 5 pilot member states, which is an impressive figure to come up with at the end of this project. And we're presenting the final report together with the report on the organizational framework in place, covering the publication of UVARs and the legal framework conditions for data access and data provision. So the foundations for what we think could be a EU-wide approach to this use of the tools. So I have exhausted more than 10 minutes, but thank you so much for the attention that you've been giving me and the opportunity to be here presenting and kickstarting this final conference. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pedro. And now we will have the presentation of the UVAR DataX2 model by Bart de Vries from Utrecht. Okay.
No worries. I won't go into the details of the DataX2 model because it is already mentioned. It's very complex. It's very big, but I tell you how we created it and how we made it usable in the context of the UVARs. And yeah, that's fine. Let me give you some context. The delegated regulation on RTTI, this is the latest one. We are talking about a moving subject and a moving context in which we have to operate. Refers to the 16157, better known as DataX2 series of standards. to exchange the data for traffic regulations and traffic restrictions. That was also the scope of the terms of reference of the project. But now the new delegated regulation also mentions TNITS, and we knew that that was coming. And we also knew that in the data community already a traffic regulation package was developed, and that you can express traffic regulations in a digital way. And we also knew that this is very much the same construct about the conditions that is used in TNITS. So DATEX and TNITS look very similar there. But we had to do a little bit more because UVARs bring additional information to a traffic regulation. And it's not only the regulatory context that is a bit wider, but there's also a lot of service information that cities want to convey to the public to support them better with the acceptance of the UVAR and the compliance, where you can buy tickets, how you can apply for a permit. That's all not in the regulation, but it is service information complementary to the controlled zones. And we had to support two use cases: the automated assessment of the accessibility constraints, what are the conditions for access, or the and it had to be transferable. It was not only on a machine-to-machine basis, so that the computer can determine whether a vehicle is allowed to go somewhere, but it had also be convertible to a human interpretable text or in a human interpretable interface. So we have if we look at the model, we have the traffic regulation publication that gives the full legal context, and we have the supporting information in the controlled zone publication. And if you look at the model, and don't worry, this is the most detailed thing I will show, and I won't even go into this one. This is the traffic regulation context. And if we go a bit further, then you see the traffic regulation context now is only the blue one, and we added for the UVARs the controlled zone, because controlled zones are not only applicable in the urban context, but we also have a lot of environmental regulations in, for example, Austria, which are not in the urban context, but in the rural areas, and they apply the same scheme. That's easy, because it's the same traffic regulation and also more or less the same service information that is required. So that is what we did. But then we ended up with a very complex and wide model, because there is a lot of variety of regulations. And it is not only to make it even more complex. In some countries, it's not even a regulation, a traffic regulation, but there's a different legal framework for establishing what we call UVARs. So we had to model that all in to make a coherent package, a coherent standard that is processable automatically in a vehicle or in a computer, that will result in the right outcome and the right behavior of the vehicle or the individual driver. And that is that is why we approached it in conditions. And we have several types of conditions. It's validity, from when to when is this regulation applicable, or from when to when are you allowed to go in. That's the time window. There's a location, of course, and we use the geometry of the area, but DATEX also allows for points and linears and so on. But the location condition, and then we have a lot of conditions about the vehicle types, the use of the vehicle, the condition of the driver, or the trip purpose of the vehicle. That all gives conditions in whether you, and that is modeled in a condition, is it allowed or not? And is it allowed together. Is this condition, is it the combination of conditions that you have to apply to? Well, this model, Stefan will recognize it, is exactly one-to-one mappable to TNITs. But that ends up in a very, very big, very complex model, because the world is complex, and especially if you look over all 28 member states in Europe, the complexity is berserk, I would say. And then DATEX is blamed for that. It's a very complex model. And then we say, yeah, but life is not easy. Yeah? But we've been challenged to create a solution for that. And that challenge doesn't come from the traffic regulation. That's something from the past. We've created the concept of profile, that you have a big model, but for your specific use case, and that could be either be on your member state level or your local level, but it also could be on the type of UVAR that you want to apply. So we say we create profiles, European profiles per UVAR type, that contains everything that could fit in a low emission zone, but it doesn't contain the things that relate to parking. That's a different profile. And from there, we developed the concept together with work package 2 of templates that with further restrictions, pre-filled messages or structures, so that people don't have to repeat everything over and over again. And what that means, I will show in the next slide. If we look at the Netherlands, not a coincidence why we choose the Netherlands, we have on the national level that there is that you can only choose 3 or 4 types of low emission zones. And we have an event that I have on the screen. I have to click it away. So an environmental zone is no access for any diesel-powered vehicle, and that's easy. But there are exemptions, and it has to do with the emission class and the vehicle type, and there are some other restrictions or exemptions combined that gives allowance to enter the zone. But this is the easiest part. Then we get the more, oh, this is the other way around. I will go back to this slide. Then we have that if your vehicle is sufficiently old, you are allowed to enter as well. Or if you have, if you are disabled and you have a wheelchair accessible vehicle, camper vans, taxis, well, there are many, but this is still the Dutch framework of exemptions. So that fits in a Dutch profile and also a Dutch template. But then we get in Amsterdam additional exemptions. If you have bought an electric vehicle, but it is not available yet because of the delivery time, you are still allowed to enter. If there is a fair or a circus, you're still allowed, these vehicles are allowed to enter. But the best one is camper vans that are going to a specific camping site in the city of Amsterdam that fit is in the zone, you are allowed to enter because of the accessibility conditions and so all this complexity was, we created a model that supports this. And also a template that can be used and reused for all low emission zones, all 18 in the Netherlands. And what you need to do then only, and that is why I went back, for the city of Amsterdam, we only had to add the geometry, the validity, and the local exemptions that differ from the ones that are in the template. So this concept of modeling and profiling is developed, and that's an interactive process to support the distribution of the UVAR type data with DATEX. And it ends up in a DATEX2 message. And if you are very interested, here you see Gemeente of Amsterdam as the issuing authority, and here you see that the fuel type diesel there's a restriction for all vehicles driving diesel. So the computer, if you have a vehicle that knows that it has a diesel engine of a specific emission class, you can write program code that says, okay, if this, then that, I'm not allowed to enter, or I can go. Then we had the challenge with the SDG. We had a second aim, the human interpretable presentation of the data. And we were quite fortunate last year, because we found out that they could handle more or less this type of data, well structured. The only thing that they needed is to understand what all these strange DATEX verbs mean. So they need a data dictionary. We provided that in the right language. We needed it as well for our tool. That needs to be said. And we explained to the people from the SDG how they could interpret such an UVAR message or such a controlled message in order, oh, that's the wrong way, in order to bring this to the My Europe or Your Europe pages that are also mandated to be filled by public authorities. So we found out that more or less it was, well, a free gift is not, it's not entirely true, because we had to do some effort, but the great minds were alike. And we found that it was very straightforward for the SDG community to create an information page on the Amsterdam, which was the demonstration, the Amsterdam low emission zone, and also the limited traffic zone, if I remember well, to be demonstrated that this concept works. So if cities use DATEX2 to publish their data, it can be published on the SDG, on the My Europe facilities as well. And that's a very interesting gift to the public authorities, the local authorities, because that's a very complex thing to handle for a lot of other information that has to be provided. But this is a real win-win. We were not aware of this big gain when we started, but in the end, it shows that we have found a very interesting application of the DATEX2 system methodology in a totally different context of service provision to the end user. And it works. And it works great, we have to say. That was my story. I think there's still a few seconds time for some questions.
Yes, well, we actually ran out of time, but I think questions on this are very important, since it is like one of the most important part of the project. So yeah, in case there are any questions in the room, feel free to ask them now. I don't think that there are in the virtual room.
There's a raised hand in the virtual world as well. Jonathan Harold Booth has a question.
Okay,
or a statement, I guess.
Can you hear me, Niklas?
Yes.
Yeah, let's start with the real room, if you agree.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't hear you. Okay, fine.
Yeah, then please.
Yeah, hi, Ian Catlow from London. Is it a requirement under the single digital gateway to produce this data, or is it a requirement under the ITS directive to produce this data and make it available through the national access point?
I am not aware of that, I must admit. I think maybe you know.
There's one use case from SDG which is related with low emission cells. With all the different stickers services they need to be is one of the use cases in SDG. And that's the overlap with our project.
Martin, you.
So in fact, the ITS directive does not give a requirement to publish data. It's only the requirement to publish data if data is available. Looking to the SDG, they have very clarified what needs to be published. That means the Road Traffic Act. That means the information about where do you have oversells that needs to be published. But of course, also this goes a little bit with the geometry. So at the end, it's not 100% clear, is there a requirement under the SDG to publish this kind of data? But I would not see so for the moment. But for sure, it's of the interest of the cities and also for the single countries. Yeah. At the end, always, and I'm working for Austriatech, which is a federal agency from Austria. We always have the problem. We're always looking on the regulations, and at the end, we want to serve our customers. Yeah. So if you want to provide this information, I think the good point is that we have several possibilities to publish our data, to make our data accessible, and to serve our citizens, our travelers. And that needs to be the general aim. Yeah.
Yeah, and in addition to that, if you look at the new delegated regulation on RTTI, there is a mandation that if you have something available digital, it has to be published. And that is mandated for this kind of roads for the 1st of January 2028. So 5 years from now, it is mandatory. But like Martin says, we want to service our customers. If I look at the Netherlands situation, we publish this data already. There was another question. There was a question in the chat.
Yes.
Yeah, there were comments from Lucy and from Jonathan about your presentation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mine was about an answer to the question from Ian.
Yeah, Jonathan was the first to raise his hand, so please.
So, yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. I apologize that I can't be in the room today. I'll keep this brief. 2 comments. One comment is around the complexity. The reality is it's a challenge. This initiative and other similar initiatives all have the same challenge, which is the reality is the regulations that we have in place for UVARs and for traffic regulations are complex. And they're complex for local good reason in a lot of cases. Of course, it would be possible to abstract to a higher level and simplify. And that is indeed probably what service providers consuming this data will do in certain cases for certain services. But the reality is the base data really needs to reflect the regulation in all its horrible complexity, as Bard was illustrating. And so we really have to come from that position. Part of the reason why I'm not with you today is I've been in a autonomous vehicle, automated vehicle symposium in the UK for the last 2 days, where virtually every presentation said we need digital traffic regulations. And these are people who are not from my world, not from the infrastructure world. These are automotive people, virtually every presentation. And the reality is, in discussing that with them, initially they say what you're producing all looks very, very complicated. Can't we make it more simple? But when they really think about it, they say, yeah, actually, we probably need the complexity. So it's a hard bullet to bite, but it is the reality. One outcome of that, and a consideration for the European Commission, is that there is likely to be an evolution in these traffic regulations and UVARs as we move forward, as we move to a world where they become more commonly visible and there's a degree of being able to compare between them, that there may be common practice arising and indeed possibly frameworks of common regulation. And that is an interesting consideration for the future. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Yeah, the context in which you want to use the data brings a lot of conflicting requirements, and we have to find a way how to manage that. We are considering to bring different levels of complexity or use or context-specific publications in order to support the different user contexts. It needs to be addressed in the near future because the requirements are diverging, and we thought there would be one answer fitting all requirements, but that's not going to happen. So we have to create a coherent mixture of answers. Lucy.
My comment was answering Ian's question. Again, sorry I can't be there with you in person. Article 2 of the SDG includes requiring UVARs to be present, and specifically named are emission stickers and road tolls. So as far as I see it, the SDG requires UVARs to be created. The ITS requires any digital data to be published, and the easiest way to produce the SDG is via DATEX, which is a very neat of the two things coming together, as far as I understand the regulations.
Okay. Thank you, Lucy, for this clarification. There's a final hand, Ivo.
Maybe a bit philosophical, but the complexity of UVAR Box and the issues you have come across within drafting the profile, does that help DATEX to learn as a system, and does it contribute in that sense as well?
Yeah, for sure. It helps on two sides. The first thing, it confirms that the way of working with profiles and creating a back office of standards that ensures consistency among the different profiles is one. And the other one is that the UVAR Box project, several of the profiles have been created with people fresh to DATEX 2, and they found their way. And that gave us a lot of insight in what kind of training and education is required to help people working with the toolbox of DATEX 2. And then in the end, we have the more philosophic approach for the roadmap of further development, of future development of DATEX with the layered approach. That's also helpful, that this is getting more visible, that we need something like that.
Because the first time we met, we talked about how urban is DATEX 2.
Absolutely.
And I think that's a great contribution to urbanize.
Okay. Okay, we will take one last question, but we have to move on because we have a lot of interesting stuff to share.
Are there also on the roadmap more UVARs on the roadmap already, like maybe school zones and things like that?
That's a question I can answer very shortly here.
Yeah.
Yeah, there are developments going. It's not in the UVAR Box project, but it is an interesting topic for the NAPCOR conference in Paris next month, where this kind of further development of the entire ecosystem of regulations and stuff like that will be addressed.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Bart.
From my understanding of the DATEX, it would be able to include school zones and stuff like that. It's sufficiently flexible. That was one of my roles in the job, to make sure that was that the new UVARs, new types, as much as possible, can be done in the datex in the kind of profile 0.
Thank you.
Okay, good. Then thank you. Let's move on to the rest of the program. If we still have questions, feel free to ask them in the chat and in the room to talk about it in the coffee break or after the end of the conference. And now let's go with the presentation of UVAR Box tool developed by Prisma solution. Thomas, the floor is yours. I can switch slides, just let me know when.
Okay, thanks, Manu. Hello to everyone. And yeah, as stated before, I work for the company Prisma Solutions. We were responsible for developing the UVAR Box tool. It was done in work package 2. And I'll give you an overview of what we have done, what the tool's purposes were, what the use cases are, and what actually then looks like. So just this short repetition about the starting point of the tool. So Manu, please go to the next slide, regarding the challenges and the solutions. So as Pedro, Manu?
Yeah,
okay, great, thanks. So what were the challenges? And they were mentioned before, like this, the information. It's often not standardized regarding UVARs, so that it is maybe available, but it's not digitally available. And if it's digitally available, it's maybe not available in a machine readable form. And as a result, there's no access to this information for service providers. So they are not able to do some automatic processing based on the data available. And as a result, the drivers often do not conform. Maybe they don't know about the actual regulation. Maybe the services they use or the tools that they use, the apps that they use, don't know about the actual regulation. And this is one of the challenges we try to focus on with the UVAR Box project, and especially with the UVAR Box tool. So we want to cope with the challenges by standardizing and digitizing the process of the UVAR definition, to provide the tool and to help municipalities and countries in this process. And of course, as you have heard before, by using datex2, so the datex2 model, this was provided by work package 1. So when we look about a quick look on how we build up the process for the development of the tool, this can be seen on the next slide. This pretty much all the tasks that we had in work package 2 fit into this slide, with the exception of the actual data collection. But we started with investigating the business process of the legal creation of UVARs. So there was a questionnaire that was sent out to cities, municipalities, and other authorities to get the information of each country, how the creation of UVARs is handled there. So we wanted to have an overview where we have similarities between the countries, and to see where the UVAR Box tool should be integrated best based on this knowledge created from questionnaire and from many talks of the country coaches with authorities, etc. And based on that, we defined then the use cases of the UVAR Box tool, and we provided technical concepts for the implementation of the tool. Based on that, we then developed the tool, and we got a lot of feedback by country coaches and by users of the tool. So it was a very important step to then incorporate the feedback that we received and disseminate, so to improve and the tool, enhance the use cases, etc. So the result, as you can imagine, was the UVAR Box tool being developed. And with this, we see on the next slide which purposes what was the result in detail. So it is a user-friendly software tool. It does look a little bit different than Pedro has shown in his mockups, but I think that's fine. It can be used for the digitisation and maintenance of UVAR data. It is actually based on the developed DATEX2 data model, but not in the sense that it is hardwired to the structure of it, but quite in a, we think, a quite generic or dynamic way of using the DATEX2 information. We designed it in a way that it can be configured to the needs of the users of the tool. So in terms of how the information from DATEX2 is represented or is rendered and shown to the user, this can be configured. Which languages can be supported can be configured. And also, as mentioned, the templates and profiles, how they can be used. This is something that can be configured, and the administrator has his hands on that as well. So yeah, the tool facilitates the conversion into standardized data into standardized form. We also wanted to make it usable to be integrated into existing solutions, because as we all know, there are a lot of tools available, and if there are already, the tool should serve the needs if there is no tool available, but also should be able to be integrated in terms of having service calls to integrate in already existing software systems. There is, of course, an authentication and permission system in the background. The tool is built upon free and open source frameworks and libraries. And in terms of the project, it is deployed on a central UVAR Box server. So there was one server where the tool has been hosted or is currently hosted, and all the data has been collected on this server. And we wanted to also design it in a way that it's just usable with standard web browsers, so you don't need extra installation or anything like this to keep the barrier low. And as a last point here regarding the results, it is the technical basis then for the data collection and further tasks in the project. Then I want to show just a simplified picture or Austriatech picture, data flow picture, however you want to name it, that shows how data can be input into the tool and how it can be output, and how the data flow could look like. So basically on the left side, you can see that there are 3 ways to get data into the UVAR toolbox. So it's either you manually create it directly on the tool. So this is the first one. The second one is that you already have fully structured data in DATEX2 format, either because it was generated by another tool, or it was already generated by the UVAR Box tool, but maybe hosted somewhere else and you want to input it here. And you also have the option of so-called semi-structured data import. This means to implement a way to convert already existing data into DATEX2 format. So we use here a shapefile and a template with placeholders referring to the attributes of the shapefile to get this data into the UVAR Box tool. And on the right side, you can see that the output of the tool, as mentioned before, is data available in DATEX2, confirming to the data model being presented before. And it can then be published for various use cases. For example, it could be published at the national access points and then be made available to navigation services, or it can be used also, like mentioned before, by a single digital gateway to process it to different other publication formats. So we come with these data flows, we also come now to the use cases of the UVAR Box tool. And here just an overview on the topics of some of the use cases. There are use cases regarding UVARs themselves, how to manage them, how to create them. There are use cases regarding the import and export, about the administration of the system, about the map, about the list. There are also use cases about the form and how to manage templates, etc. But I will not go into detail here because we will see this later on when I demonstrate the tool itself. So just one last slide regarding the theoretical part, regarding the components of the UVAR Box tool. And please go to the next slide, Manu. We can here just to give an overview and to better explain also how this configuration of the tool takes place. So we have a couple of user interface components that can be seen here in green, like there is a map component, there is a filter and list component, there's a form component, import and export, etc. And then you have here in light blue, as Jan, you can see what backend components are provided by the tool to for the different use cases regarding the permissions, the handling, and also the data access to actually the database itself. And on the right side in blue, you see then the important part of the configuration files. So the configuration files on the server, which then determine how the tool actually behaves. And yeah, now you have seen a lot about concepts, about architecture of it, and I think it's now a good point to go to the more practical part. And we provide you now a short video with the most important use cases, we think. And yeah, let's please just start it, and I will explain a little bit about it. So as mentioned before, the tool itself is a web application. So you only need a web browser. You need to have a valid login. With this login, the permission system then determines which privileges you do have when you enter the UVAR Box tool. And I think, at least for me, the video is stuck. Okay, now it works again. Thanks, Manon. So as you can see, as a basic structure, you on the left side, you have a map where you see a lot of UVARs being digitized already. These are not all UVARs that were digitized during the project, but some of them. And you have like a list view on the right side, and you have different options at the top bar. For example, you can hide the map to just concentrate on the list and the attributes there. You have the language support, so you can switch between the languages based on what has been configured. You have the option to filter your list or your UVARs. For example, here we filter. I think it's stuck again. Okay, maybe it's just with broadcasting it is stuck. Okay, sorry for that. I will just keep on talking. So one of the use cases here that I want to show is the import of a fully digitized UVAR. So as mentioned, you already need as a prerequisite DATEX2 information available. And on the tool, you can then just, I use here the search functionality to zoom to the city of Karlsruhe. And this is the use case that I will show here. So I preload the import file, which is in this case a zip file, which contains the actual XML DATEX2 file. And I have here the option to validate it on import. And the import is finished, and it should pop up on the left side on the map. And also when you use the list search, it is filtered, and you can see that it's actually being imported. The second use case is the import of semi-structured data. As mentioned before, there you have to have the data already in a format like this. So here on the left side, you see a screenshot of a QGIS, which is able to manipulate your shape files. And on the right side, you see like an import template in XML. And this serves as the basis to import data, which is maybe not complete, but can later on the tool be completed. So again, I prepared here the import file, zip file with the two files, and I use the semi-structured import here, and it is imported in the same way as we have seen before. And again, it pops up here on the map, and you can also see it's also possible that it contains more than one area that depicts the location of the UVAR. Also, as mentioned, this uses of manual creation of a UVAR on the tool. So for this use case, what is important is the concept of templates, as mentioned by Bart. So this is a fictional example. I chose the city of Ettlingen, for those who are familiar with Baden-Württemberg, just to showcase it here. So when you create a new UVAR, you have to pick a template. So as mentioned before, a template is a way of already simplify the process of defining an UVAR, because then only the city or regional specific characteristics, so to say, have to be filled in or changed. So when the template is loaded, the information is loaded based on the profile and the template in the background. So it's already restricted to the things that are relevant, in this case, for a low emission zone. So the user basically has to change things like city names or details regarding exemptions to really define the UVAR. And yeah, some of the elements you have seen before in the slides of Bart, but just to say a second time, that the configuration of how this looks like here in regard to the layout, and also in regard how the datex2 elements are named on the client, is something that can be configured in the background. So here the user basically puts in some information about the regulation, and then we come to the heart of the UVAR definition, so to say, to the condition set and the values and the attributes that can be changed there. So we open up here the condition set, and here we have like the validity condition to define the time frame when it is valid, also the location where it is valid, and the vehicles it applies to. So this is the way of representing the condition model that we have seen before, the slide from Bart, and how it can be filled in. So here, when we define the geometry, you can also have the option to just draw it on the map, or you can preload it from already existing geometry files. In this case, a shape file which contains the boundaries, the administrative boundaries of the area close to Ettlingen. So the user just chooses it, and it is imported. So there's no need to digitize the area by hand. And this can then be further refined or edited if needed. But it's a good starting point to shorten the time of digitizing. And as you can see here, now we all see the vehicle condition, but there are a lot of different other conditions or exemptions that you could state here. Also information about where you can apply for a permit, what the costs or the fees for them are, etc. But we will not go into detail of these points right now. When saving, it's important that the information is being validated against the datex2 model. So you also get a validation if everything is input correctly. And if this is not the case, you can then change the missing fields. And I think that is pretty much it for the presentation of the tool. You see that it has been digitized, and it was not a too long task to digitize the UVAR of Ettlingen without handling maybe the exemptions in detail. So I hope you got a good overview of what the UVAR Box tool looks like, what it can handle. Of course, there are some other use cases, for example, the export or the administration interface to configure more things about the appearance of it. But yeah, this is more or less the technical basis for the data collection, which we will hear about more now in the next session by Lucy and the country coaches. And yeah, this is pretty much my presentation on the tool. And thanks for your attention and your interest.
Thank you very much, Thomas. From the online community, there's currently no questions, so we can go straight to the questions in the physical audience.
Okay. Are there any questions for Thomas?
Lucy's raising her hand in case there are no questions from the physical community.
All right, yeah, there is no question in the physical room. So Lucy.
Okay, Lucy.
Well, I think what Thomas didn't say, and I think it is really cool as a non-techie, is I understand that if the DATEX structure changes, it's fairly easy for the tool to change. Maybe Thomas could say a little bit about that, because I think it's magic.
Yeah, this is what I tried to say with the configuration that I mentioned. So basically, you load up the DATEX2 model, so the XST schema files on the server, and the form that we could see here for the definition of a UVAR is really created based on that. So it's rendered based on this information. So if there are changes in the DATEX2 model, basically you could then exchange these files, and the tool itself, no software developer is needed to get use of these changes. And I think this is the point that you wanted to raise. So we try to make it as generic as possible. Of course, there are limits, but as generic as possible, and to give the hands more to configuration and administration of the tool. And I think this is quite important also regarding the different deployment scenarios we have and we discussed in the project. And I think it will be a topic for later on in the sessions, because it will be different in each of the countries. So it's not like we will have one solution that fits all countries, but they're rather different solutions. And we also know that adaptations maybe will be needed at one or the other point. So this will also differ from the use cases, from the deployment scenarios where it actually is being put in place.
There is one question in the real room.
Sorry, I might maybe this question is rather related to the next presentation. But very practically speaking, when you apply this tool at the cities level, how heavy was this, in terms of skills development and capacity building for those who use it? What was your, what could you sense? Is this, let's say, an easy digestible solution, or what were your first experiences?
I think I'm not the right person to answer this question, but I think it will be covered in the next session probably, because there we talk about the data collection and the experiences by the country coders, and they, together with Lucy, are the experts on this topic.
No worries, but that's actually a great transition. So maybe we can take a short coffee break. Let's say 10 minutes. That means at 35, we should start the next session, which is indeed about how the process was of digitization in the countries of the project. Okay. Thank you very much, Thomas.
Many thanks for giving us the floor. I'm sorry I can't be with you, but it's a sign of how well the remote working has worked. The project's worked really, really well, despite the fact we haven't met. So well done. Just background about why we chose the 5 countries we did. So at the start of the project, when we put the bid in, there were 869 UVARs in Europe and 830 in the EU, with 315 LEZs, pollution schemes, UVARs without emission schemes, and charging schemes. So you can see from this map taken from the Urban Access Regulations website that I run, where all the UVARs are in Europe. So the tender said it had to be 80% of the UVARs in Europe covered and focus on some countries. So the 5 focus countries we chose of Netherlands, Belgium, Germany, Austria, and Italy covered 90% of all UVARs and 91% of all LEZs. And as you can see here, where most of them are is Italy. And before so the 5 countries not only does that, is also includes examples of all the types of UVAR that are included in the call for tender. Before we go on to the country coaches themselves, I want to say a huge thank you for the country coaches and the amazing work they did. Not only what they will talk about now in terms of the data collection, but they also did loads of work in terms of the rest of the project, in getting the questionnaires that went into Thomas's work, and especially Italy, who had a momentous task. At the beginning, I thought it was undoable almost, but they've produced magic, all of the country coaches. So the data collection, the tool will be usable for all UVAR types in all member states, and the agreed data collection is 100% of the LEZs for the focused member states, which is greater than 80% of the EU LEZs. We will include at least one UVAR of each type and the best estimate from other member states, as well as the other UVAR types. So without further ado, we go on to Germany with Florian.
So, thank you very much, Lucy. I will share my presentation. Hope you can all see it now. Yeah, thank you very much also for giving me the chance to present the achievements the UVAR Box project has made in Germany. My name, as you heard, is
you haven't shared your screen yet, Florian?
Okay, you cannot see.
No, it's fine.
Because I see it in the.
We can see it.
Okay, yep, you can see it. Okay, cool.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Sorry.
Yeah, so what I wanted to say is that I work with cities and other public authorities in Germany since many years in the field of traffic management and other traffic related topics. And so I felt very honored to be able to be the country coach for Germany. And I want to start my presentation with the situation we found in Germany. So let me move to the next slide. On one hand, in most of the cities, we had UVARs available, different type of UVARs, as you can see here, and there was a strong focus on the LEZs, as Lucy also has pointed out, and there are currently 66 low emission zones in Germany, and additionally 4 low emission zone Euro 6. So these are the diesel bands, and 79 cities are affected. What is very special about Germany compared to the other countries in Europe is that there are currently no city charging or road charging schemes. And of course, also we faced some challenges during our way. You can categorize them into organizational and technical challenges. And I just want to give you 2 or 3 examples on the challenges. One is in the early stage of the UVAR Box project, we presented the project and its scope and goals to the MAPtm user group. The MAPtm user group is an organization who works on the improvement and the further development of the national access point in Germany. And all the major cities are members of the user group. And the reply we got is that these people who are on the strategical level, these are decision makers, they are not really interested in the UVAR topic. And they also told us that the people who are really into this UVAR topic, they are, I would say on an operational level, they are not or little interested in taking part in EU projects or to have a cross-border exchange. So it was really tough, and we had to really dig deep at times to get to the right people and to get them on board. That was one challenge. And another one is this typically different organizational structures, which comes with the size of the city. So the smallest city we have contacted was Urbach, with not even 10,000 inhabitants. On the other end of the spectrum, we had Berlin with 3.7 million. And as you can imagine, the structures and responsibilities are really different. In a small town, you have one person who takes care of traffic management, of infrastructure, traffic planning, but even construction and gardening, it's all on one person, whereas in a big city, for each of these topics, you have an own unit. So this was really interesting. And on the technical level, that was also challenging, that there were existing systems in place. And that's also, again, mainly in the big cities. So they had some systems where they collect some type of UVAR data already. And mostly these systems were proprietary, and as you can imagine, the data type coming out of the systems were really different, and so this was another challenge. But let me come now to the results, or to the strategy, to the approach we made. Of course, during the project, we contacted a lot of organizations. The focus was on cities, so we got in contact with 100 cities, but also all the states of Germany, the 16 states. And also, which was very important, was the Environment Agency, because they had a really special role, or still have a really special role in Germany, because they published all the low emission zones in a semi-structured way on a web-based GIS website. And yeah, therefore we worked also closely together with them, but also, of course, with the Federal Highway Research Institute, who are the provider of the national access point on behalf of the ministry. Yeah, so we started also to contact regions, because we had this idea that the regions could help as a data coordinator, and they do successfully in Germany in many fields. For example, the region of Stuttgart and region of Frankfurt in the area of traffic management, but also, for example, the region of Cologne. But when it comes to UVARs, it turned out that it was not in their scope, and therefore they couldn't support us that much regarding the UVARs. So we skipped that plan. And regarding the digitization of the UVARs, initially we planned to give that tool, which was presented by my colleague Thomas Biribauer before. We give it to the cities, and they can digitize the UVARs. But for two reasons, this didn't work out. One of the main reasons, and this affects almost all of the cities, was that they have a lack of resources. And the second one is that we had also a slight delay due to in the provision of the tool due to some requirements that came quite late into the project. But finally we succeeded, I can say. We could digitize all the low emission zones, and this was by the big help of the Environment Agency, because they provided us the GIS data they are already publishing. And that helped us. We could import at least the geometries and some of the attributes, and the rest had to be done manually. But finally, we achieved this. And also, until today, we have already provided the UVAR Box tool to 66 cities. And also, what I'm especially proud of, I have to say, is that we also have published the data on the national access point, and the new national access point in Germany. We have just a switch from an older version to a totally renewed national access point. It's called Mobilität now, and we have published the data there. And I'm also proud because we were the first ones on that new platform who publish data 2 in version 3, and also the first one who published in that particular category of static road signs and regulations. So this yeah, was a really good achievement, I would say. So what is going to be now from now on? Of course, it's now up to the cities to collect and to digitize all the other UVARs that we couldn't in the project. So there's a lot of work to do from the city side. And regarding the UVAR Box tool, I'm quite happy that we can continue the operation of the tool and that's secured, and also the support for the cities, of course, will go on. And in parallel, we have talks on the EU level and on the national level about further improvements, also about the special role of the Environment Agency and what can be their role in the future also. So let me summarize what we have achieved. I think we did a really great job, and I want to thank all the colleagues from the team, from the consortia. It was amazing working with you together, and I think what we really have done is that we have all the LSZ now in a machine readable format that can be integrated in any navigation information system. And also we have given the possibility to all of the cities in Germany, or at least the ones who wanted to digitize all their UVAR data in this machine readable format, and also to publish. So I think this was a really great work, but I think also that this was a very important first step on the way forward, and we need, and this is also what I want to stress out, we need the further support of the cities, but also of the states and national bodies, and of course also from the European Commission on our journey to a better informed and digitized Europe. Yeah, thank you for that. And if you have any questions, you can contact me or ask it also now in the chat or directly in the auditorium. Thank you.
Please don't forget, in case we have questions before we go to the next person. And the room is muted, so please unmute yourself. Manuel, yeah, great.
Sorry, I was just repeating in the room what you wrote in the chat, that if there is any question about Germany, they can be asked now.
Okay.
Okay. In case there is no question, then we can go on with Italy. If I manage to show the slides. Yeah. Here.
No.
You need to share the screen again for the online attendees.
Yeah.
Many screens, too many keyboards and so on.
Okay.
Yeah, we can see that well.
Perfect. I should be fine.
Okay, good morning. I am Tito Stefanelli and I am from PRT, and here is my colleague Claudio Disparati from MEMEX. We were the country coaches for Italy. Let us explain our nightmare for several months in Italy, because as Lucy said at the beginning, in Europe there are 300 and some UVARs and LEZ. 166 are in Italy. In Italy, there are almost 8,000 municipalities, most of which have some kind of UVARs. So, number. Moreover, currently at the national level, there are no framework on UVAR digitalization. So, no any people within the ministry knows how many UVARs there are in Italy. And consequently, there is a low digitalization level of municipalities and lack of human resources and related skills. And so these are the main issues we have faced. So from the start, we know this situation. And from the beginning, we made the contacts with a lot of municipalities. We sent emails, had phone calls with more than 400 municipalities. And there is, we can not see, but there are more than, no, don't worry. I will explain. And more than 1,200 contacts within the cities and municipalities, inviting them, and they attended the UVAR Box workshops in Italy, and they participated. They expressed their interest, but they do not have resources and skills. This is more than 40 municipalities responded to the questionnaire, to the initial questionnaire. Most of these 40 are manually digitized by us with the support of the cities. So they are not so good. So we try to define the strategy. Initially, we contacted the Italian authorities at different levels. So the Italian ministry, we contacted directly them, and a good cooperation was established. But due to the project time scale and the high number of interested municipalities, the ministry support could not be fully utilized, because, as I already said, they do not have the idea of how many UVARs there are in Italy, and also the low emission zones. At regional level, we contacted the regions. We established with them a good contact, but they were not able to fully support us in the digitalization of the UVAR and of the low emission zones. So after some weeks, some months of nightmares, we changed our strategy. And so we defined for the 166 municipalities which has the LES a template that was defined by us, and with all the requirements at the regional level. And then we import this template and altered this for each municipality manually. We imported the boundaries from the National Statistic Institutes, that is good in Italy. And for the UVAR, in the UVAR toolbox, we imported, as I already said, for the LES, the municipal boundaries, while, and this is the screen is not shown, but for the other UVAR, we manually insert the boundaries. And so I will give the floor, because there are a lot of things to say.
Thank you, Tito. Okay, so I will share with you the result achieved by the Italian country coaches. That I can say that we achieved a good result, because we digitized 195 low emission zones that are more than the initial target, the target defined at the beginning of the project. Beyond this, we defined also 2 limited traffic zones, 1 congestion charge, 8 emergency schemes, and furthermore, we established, as Tito said, a contact with the Italian ministry, and this is a very good point for the future activities, and we contacted more than 400 municipalities. Furthermore, the Italian country coaches defined also a dedicated dashboard in order to monitor the work progress over time, and it has been a very useful tool for us, because especially at the beginning of the process and the project, when we contacted the municipalities, and at the end of the project when we defined the UVAR. Sorry. So beyond this result, we defined also a plan for the next activity that will be carried out after the end of the project. And this plan is based on three main aspects. The first one is that we have to continue the UVAR digitization activities, not only for the lands not already defined, but also for the other kind of UVARs as limited traffic zone, pedestrian zone, and so on. But furthermore, the Italian country coach should also continue the cooperation with the Italian cities in order to validate and to maintain the UVAR data and to train the municipality staff. And in parallel, we should continue the cooperation with the MIMS, with the Italian ministry, in order to provide support for defining a national framework. Sorry again. Okay. In parallel to the plan mentioned before, we elaborated also some recommendation that we summarize in this slide. And in particular, we understood that on the basis of the low digitization level of the Italian municipalities, is very important to provide to the municipalities a tool able to define and digitize the UVAR data, and the UVAR Box tool would be a very useful solution in these terms. But is also very important provided to the municipalities a clear guideline, not only for the use of the UVAR Box tool, but also for integrating the DATEX2 protocol, especially in the case of existing tool. And as a last point, we can underline that we have to identify the optimum strategy to provide the UVAR Box tool to the cities, because on the basis of the city sites, we have different requirements, different skills, different resources, and we should provide the UVAR Box tool in different way in such a solution, centralized at a national level or on-premise solution. Thank you. That's all from my side.
Yes, we are at this moment, sorry, just one last remark. We are in a good position to push the ministry to use such kind of tool, because there are no digital tool at national level. So, first in, and so this is our main outcomes and our effort. It is quite difficult to summarize it in a few slides, but
Maybe speaker, if there are any questions, again, this is the moment for it.
Hi.
Hi.
Thanks for the presentation. Just a clarification. So, as it is now, if one of the cities that you have mapped is changing the regulation, how does it reflect in the tool? You are updating it, they are doing it directly, or
it's a matter of the future. It's the suitability of the project. We are in contact with them. We can answer, we can help them in order to update, but we have to define the strategy. That is a matter of the review.
Okay.
Any other question? Okay, Niklas, is there any question online?
No, not the case.
We are available even after.
Thank you.
In terms of the last question, it's about sustainability. When you hear more about that later from Martin, and as I said, the dialogues has been started.
There's one question online from Valentin Kranz. I don't know if I will try to ask him to unmute, otherwise you need to write it in the chat. Can you speak now, Valentin?
Yeah. Hey everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, thanks. Just a very quick question. I was wondering, you were talking a lot about low emission zones, but when I checked the UVAR map, it was mainly low traffic zones, those zonas tráfico limitado. So I was wondering why there were only you wrote only two. So in your presentation I saw only two low traffic zones and a lot of low emission zones. Or am I getting it?
If you go back to the slide I said at the beginning, the digitization efforts have been focused on low emission zones. And that's where our focus was in discussion with the Commission in terms of the remit. But the methodology is the same and the possibility is the same for limited traffic zones.
All right. Okay. Thanks.
Thank you, Lucy.
Okay, so then we can go on with Belgium, and Nuno is here. This one to go forward, this one to go back.
Okay, thank you.
And it would be good if people can see me.
Yes, okay. Well, good afternoon already to everyone here and also online. My name is Nuno Frederiks. I had the honor to, together with my colleague Dennis Hoffman, to be the country coach for Belgium and also for the Netherlands, which will later on also provide a presentation of our results and our strategy. Was quite what you'll see from the different country coaches is that they will have different approaches, different strategies, because the countries are different, and that's what every culture in Europe makes it also very special, our continent.
It has changed.
Oh, okay. Now I can see it, yes. Okay, thank you. So the situation in Belgium is different than Italy, of course. It has their own specific particularities, also Belgium. One of them is how the government is established. So there is indeed a national federal state, which has its own very old traffic regulation framework with different laws, which are mostly complemented with the regional and city regulations, specifically for the UVARs that were in scope to our project. Low emission zones that we were just talking, which was the main focus of our project. It's at regional level. For example, in Wallonia, they have a regional regulation for it. Brussels also as a city, but also as a region. But basically, cities are the ones that establish the real regulation related to it. UVAR digitization is in Belgium, and this is commonly is mostly driven by the effort from cities. We call it the front-runner cities. The main cities, they are the ones that have been already involved and already developing a lot of digitization of UVARs. They already make this data also accessible via their own open data portals. Although in multiple formats, there's not really an agreed harmonization between these city-driven efforts. I want to highlight also in Flanders, there's also already a mobility data program, which is already supporting mobility digitization. Not really the type of use cases and UVARs that we were dealing with, but the factor is related with the mobility domain. There's also a big potential to collaborate and to look for extension of their scope, maybe to this type of regulations. The national access point in Belgium is established at the federal level. It's a cooperation between the different regional government and the federal governments for all the regions. And it's actually an app that is already capable and is already providing UVAR data access to it, not in the format that we have established, but nevertheless, it's already providing it. But in relationship, in the discussions with the responsible organization for operating the NAP, they are indeed already prepared to support also the work that we've done, using their own procedure for registration data and also publishing data, which again, it's different for different countries, this procedure. Nevertheless, a plus point for the national access point. There's something that is readable. I can read it here, but so again, our focus in Belgium and as a project was the low emission zones, to use that as a kind of a first use case that would help us to shape up the process for each of the countries. In Belgium, there are 3 low emission zones currently. There is also a regional regulation for Wallonia which allows cities to implement low emission zones from 2023. There are plans from different cities already for some time, also in Flanders, to implement low emission zones, but during the course of our project, they didn't occur. So we this is the state, and of course, there is a growing number of cities. I think almost 600 cities in Belgium, 300 in Flanders. They all have their own pedestrian zones or limited traffic zones, but very dispersed. So there's lots of work that needs to be done in digitization in general. Yeah. So what was our strategy? We thought that we would like to use the front runners position of the cities, of the city of Antwerp, Brussels, and Ghent, which are already familiar and already have their own tools for digitization. We want to establish a collaboration with these cities. And based on the results and the way they would integrate the results of our project into their own processes, we would use that as a showcase in order to promote that to the rest of the cities that would be starting or willing to start digitization processes. There was a challenge, even approaching these 3 cities, is that the fact that UVAR subject and the UVAR combined with digitization is spread out through different departments, 3 different organizations within the cities itself. So for us was already a challenge to identify who are the right mandated people to support or taking care of mandated to do this digitization. Took us quite some time. We felt like sometimes that we were running around the corridors of the cities and buildings trying to find the right people. I think maybe some of you can relate with this. By the end of the project, we thought we have a well-established group of people by different cities who are motivated and willing to bring forward the results of our project. So we are confident that this will continue. We have someone here in the room also. Thank you for being present. And even taking consideration of this context, we were able to digitize, as we committed, the 3 low emission zones which are available in the UVAR Box tool. We did some examples of limited traffic zones together with the cities. That was our strategy. We wanted to immediately from the beginning that they would do it themselves, not being trusted on the country coaches, because in the end they would need to do this without us, preferably. As big cities, larger cities, they have the means and the resources to do this. And of course, the UVAR Box tool is now already introduced and is known by these 3 cities. And they have plans to use it and to update the work that we've done using the tool once that is necessary. We hope that we still are able, together with them, to expand and spread the word to the rest of the cities. We are in contacts with some other not front-runner cities, but cities which are willing and starting in this process of digitization. And we are here as country coaches to continue to support in that transition and scaling up to the rest of the country. That's actually part of our post-UVAR Box plan for it, or suggestions, proposals for the country of Belgium, also together with the organizations here. Is that, of course, it should be continued for the upcoming low emission zones that we stock, all the limited traffic zones that are already they're already in place that still need to be digitized. The UVAR Box tool should be made available, I saw the same in Italy, in different forms, and it should be tailor-made to the resources available and to the knowledge of each of the cities into using of the tools. We're talking about cities indeed for 5,000 inhabitants that probably have a small pedestrian zone. They should probably be served differently from an outside, a third party that would support them to doing this, instead of Antwerp, who has probably 20 people who are able to operate this kind of tool. So we should be flexible in providing our tools to this type of users. We do encourage the identification of this regional program, which would combine this digitization aspect with mobility. Mobility data is one of the Flanders program that is dealing with this, but we are in contact with the research, in contact with the regions and the authorities and the governments to identify what would be the most suitable initiative or program that could take over the results, and then from the regional level, try to support them to cities in a more harmonized regional manner. And like I said, the NAP is ready. They do need some work that is being done already at NAP core level into updating the scheme. It's called the metadata template that is used in order to publish the data at the NAPs. But they are very active also at that level. So I wouldn't be worried about the involvement of NAP in our project results. I think this was my last slide for Belgium.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I will take some questions online or offline.
Nicholas, are there questions online?
No questions from our side.
Okay.
Then we can go on with Austria. Thank you, Nana. Thank you.
So greetings from Austria. My name is Alexander. I'm one of two country coaches next to Martin Böhm. And I would like to present you how the project was for Austria and how we were able to gain some data. As you can see, the situation in Austria, we do not have a lot of low emission zones. Compared to Italy, it's like a joke, only 7. Especially when it comes to emergency zones, we do have 6, but nearly they are barely triggered. So you need to imagine we do have fine dust indicators marked on the streets. And if one of those indicators are going up, the emergency zone is triggered. But normally it isn't, because the air quality and the wind is also helping Austria to mitigate this problem. When it comes to DATEX 2, it's sometimes confusing in Austria because normally they use the version 2.3, and this is not compatible with the version 3.0 and upwards. So basically, when we talk about TROs in nowadays, it is always version 3.3, because 3.2 doesn't have the TRO inside. Thanks to the Austrian government, we have 9 federal states, and they all are connected to each other, but at some point they all have their own territory when it comes to the data. So basically we reached out and we're also looking for front runners, and we found some, especially Mödling was very eager. Mödling is in Lower Austria and it's a nice and beautiful municipality. And Mödling was really eager to be on the project at the first time they had the chance. Also Salzburg, St. Pölten, when it comes to Tyrol, Innsbruck, in Styria, Graz, and in Kärnten, it was Villach. The major challenge there was to convince them that the data will not go anywhere else except for the project. So it was not easy to convince them that the data will be safe and it will not be tampered. So when it comes to sharing data, there is a minor wall of fear, and we needed to tackle that. What we did is write a letter. We do have 2 associations. One is for municipalities above 5,000 people, and the other one is the Association of Cities, which is above up to like 2 million in Vienna or 1.9 million in Vienna. So we did have a good leverage effect on there because we were able to grasp all the 2,100 cities all over Austria with one newsletter. When it comes to the answers from them, it was not 2,100 answers back, to be honest. But we did the best of it, and therefore we had the front runners. We also had contact to UMTC, which were providing us the parking data. And so basically we had a fundament to go on. Exactly. So all in all, we were able to digitize 273 UVARs all across Austria. We do have all the pedestrian zones from Vienna. There are nearly 260 streets which are marked as pedestrian zones. And also we have around 259 parking zones all across Austria. When it comes to municipalities, you can imagine you do not need a pedestrian walk for like 200 people, and you also do not need to restrict the parking regulation because there is so much space when it comes to the municipalities. So what's our next target? We would like to motivate more cities to be eager to be on board, to be a part of UVAR Box and also UVAR Exchange, and together that we are able to have really a broad perspective of whole Europe, where are the UVARs and how you can cope with this UVAR you're heading for. If you would like to get in contact with us, my name is Alexander. You have there my email, and if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Any questions?
Yeah, please.
Just for curiosity, why were they very scared to share data?
That's a very good question. Normally it has to do with the license. So when the city is generating their data by themselves, they have the copyright on it. And to share this copyright is sometimes really hard for them. So you need to convince them that you will not do anything else with the data except for those purposes we set.
But if you look at it like low emission zone, it's free available data. You can scrape it from the internet and you have it. So
if you have it digitized.
Yeah.
But normally they are not forced to do it. But I think Martin wants to say also something about the topic.
I think we have a general problem with public authorities publishing data in Austria, because they always have the question, what is afterwards my responsibility on the data if the content is at least partly wrong? We are discussing also towards automation, and the future. And if the information I provide is wrong, and somebody will get at the end a nice ticket, a nice letter, might he be able to pass it through because my original source data was wrong.
Yeah.
And that's really a big problem. Data is there, it's partly maintained, but it's not 100% correct. We also identified in Austria, we have a huge GIS system in place for whole Austria. We have everything digitized. And by using the UVAR Box tool, we identified 3 errors in this system where zones are overlapping in the GIS system. So the data itself is never 100% correct. And how to validate that and what does it mean at the end for my responsibility, that's something, and I will come to that later on, where we need to find a solution on a European level. That we need to identify, okay, data is information. And this is still not with the single authorities. Currently, data is used for information. And we are already discussing the next step. Data is not just information, it's now obligation when we're looking towards automation. What does that mean for my data?
that data is never 100% correct. You never
So,
get that.
so we had a feedback loop with Vienna when it comes to the pedestrian zones. There were some minor mistakes when it comes to the polygons, and they were able to fix it in a couple of days and uploaded it on the SDG. You said you have seen it before. It's data.gv.at, and so basically they updated their spreadsheet with the thanks to the UVAR tool, because otherwise it would not be recognized as a mistake.
No, but you will always have a problem, of course, on what kind of map you use it, because if you now saw, I believe the first one, it was OpenStreetMap, but if you use Google TomTom here, they all have a different thing. I mean, we always try to use satellite images because they're the most correct. But you always see a little difference, and then if you put the OSM layer onto a Apple layer, then it says like you are allowed to go there, and but actually not. It's always a thing you have to look at.
And I think,
well, this raises another point that I've been asked, by clients. I support mainly fleets, and they're talking about liabilities. So one of the things sometimes when they want some software solution is they don't want to think about it, and if something is wrong, they kind of blame someone else. It's always this legal. So what is the plan here on that part? Legalities and responsibilities. It's a very good point, actually. That always.
It's also a good question. What we proposed at Austriatech is that we would like to host the UVAR Box tool on the national access point to have the chance to motivate more municipalities and cities to put in their data. But when it comes to liability, I'm not really sure about that, because normally when you're the data owner, you have also the liability. But at some cases, when you outsource your data to a supplier or a supporter, and they tamper with the data unexpectedly, maybe, I don't think that you're responsible for them. Any further questions?
One remark. We see in the Netherlands that the more digital presence the public authority has, the larger the liability is getting. And that's not only a matter of giving a license and saying that this information is informative. We have court decisions where the court says, okay, you end user, you may rely that the data provided by the government is right to some extent. All these exceptions in place, but here the error was traced back to an error in the data provided by the public authority. So even the legal system is coming up and stimulating data quality from the public authorities, and that's already happening now, and that brings a lot of additional requirements to data governance and data management and data authenticity. But key is quality of service to the end user, and that's data quality provided by the public authority, and that's not going to change. With all the disclaimers that we have, public may expect and rely on the rightness of the data.
Okay, Niklas, is there anything online?
Yes, there are two questions. I will just read them out from Michael Ivari. What types of coordinate systems do you use, and what are your thoughts on this? And secondly, how do you foresee to manage future updates of the data model?
So first question was which kind of card system we use, or
coordinate systems.
VGS84 normally. In Esri standards is I don't recall the number, but it's Esri and VG84. And the second question was?
How do you foresee to manage future updates of the data model?
That's a good question. So basically, we need to ensure that the cities which are in cooperation with the National Access Point and the UVAR Box tool are committing to the updates. So because we can't sweep every day 2,100 cities to get this update as close as possible. So basically, we need to rely on the cities and the municipalities that they fulfill their kind of work, and we are on the other side ensure that the service is nearly 99.8% online and available for the public.
Thank you very much. I think I have unmuted Mikael in case he wants to say something. Otherwise, we can continue.
Yes, thank you. And I believe that maybe WGS84 is a suitable system that is the same all over the globe. But then I imagine you must make a lot of transitions from local coordinate systems, and maybe you will have some accuracy problems sometimes, depending on if you have very detailed specifications of the shapefiles. Is that something you have experienced?
Yes, and we do have one member of Austriatech which has only one job to transfer all this data via a tool. He's called Stefan Chilitsky. He's like working for Austriatech nearly 11 years now, and he's the real expert when it comes to converting data and geographics. Yeah. So we do have experts.
Yeah, sure. It's just that these are things that we have come across in Sweden and in Gothenburg when working on these topics as well. And especially the data model, the tools that we use for digital regulations, the tool we're using in Gothenburg, we have had 29 updates of the data model since 2008. So that is, of course, challenging when you want to maintain quality of the data, as I believe it was Martin who pointed out that. Thank you.
Thank you to Lucy. I can see.
Yeah, there are also two other comments earlier on. One is from Mike Pinkas from ANWB, who says the data quality issue is already existing with where the traffic signs are, and are they viewable? And sometimes penalties can be skipped for that reason. Of course, Mike Pinkas probably saying good for his members, but it's a really valid point. And Jonathan Harrod Booth says that it might require a change in legislation. In the UK, the new legislation is planning to make the data representation legally binding, not just informative. And I think there was one other country in our project, I think it was Austria, who was planning to make a digital mirror legal. It will be a process, and as others said, it's a bigger discussion.
I think it would be now the perfect time to continue because we're running a bit out of time.
Yeah. So Nuno.
Yeah, we can get to know
Let's.
Okay, so I'm back with the Netherlands. I'm sorry. Which is actually where MAPtm comes from. We are based in the Netherlands, and together again with Dennis, we also fulfilled the role of the country coach in the Netherlands, which we'll see it's completely different than the other ones that you just experienced. So I expect totally different questions. So there is indeed also in the Netherlands also a national traffic regulation framework already for quite some time, which covers also some of the scope of the UVARs, complemented with city regulations also. It's about 350 cities in the Netherlands. In the Netherlands, there is already quite for some time a lot of attention, a lot of work done on digitization of mobility. There is also even since 2018, I think, a smart mobility policy plan, which has a specific, one of the focus is the digitization of all mobility data and to make it available to services that could help and serve also the public goals of the policies. There are several digitization programs going on in the Netherlands with different perspectives, different scopes, overlapping each other sometimes, and also overlapping our own scope of the UVARs. Some of them are more related with the logistics, seeing logistics as a kind of a front runner use cases, where probably the business case is easier to understand and easier to move things on. But there is also what what they call the national data chain meeting, platform table, where all the different road authorities sit together and discuss how can they do digitization of mobility data in a more concentrated and harmonized manner. So 350 plus road authorities should be represented at this table. And they have already in place already for some time what they call regional data teams, which data teams that are at regional level clustered and supporting smaller cities. Bigger, with the experience of bigger cities, we have more resources. How can they, together with assure the digitization in an harmonized manner? They started already more than 10 years ago with the data top 5. It's changed to data top 15, and I know that since this year, I look at BART data top 80 something, right? So, which shows how quickly it goes and how the work that is being done at the public side in the Netherlands. It's all very much public finance and with the support of the ministry, with all the different levels of government. So a lot of work and different from some of the other countries that we've seen here. Since the beginning of this summer, there's been launched a new initiative. It's called the National Access Point for Mobility Data, which is above the National Access Point for that is being requested by the delegated regulations by the ITS directive. And this initiative tries to concentrate all the different results of all the digitization programs and try to coordinate how the access to it, not just to access, but also to monitoring quality and also who is accessing and how is being used all this data, which is the next level. Who is using the data that we are digitizing? How is being used? What the effect? Where is the impact that is being, and how can we relate that with the policy goals of the different governments? So it's a little bit step forward to what we've been discussing here. So coming back to the scope of our project, low emission zones. There are 15 cities. I heard Bart saying 18, but I thought 15.
You will be right.
Okay. The Netherlands is also very busy and very putting forward the concept of zero emission zones, mostly focused on urban logistics and to the carbonization of the city centers. There is an agreement of 27 cities we are committed in 2025 to start implementing these zero emission zones, which is a kind of a different next level of low emission zones, which need also to be, and it will be digitized, I know. They are already digitized, but not yet available. And of course, there's an increase in cities with limited traffic zones and pedestrian zones that they call the autoluwe zones, where they are giving more space to the slower ways of movement, bicycles and pedestrian. There's a big trend in the Netherlands. So huge need for digitization and to inform about these big changes. Okay, so our strategy needed to be different, of course. We don't want to invent the wheel again based on our project. So our strategy is to identify and to get in contact with all the different digitization programs to identify the overlap with our project and where do we add value to their already running project. We're not going to put something parallel. We wanted to add value to and to try it as much as possible for them to also to be in line with the project objectives and to promote why should you think Europe? Why shouldn't you just think national? Why should you think that to increase your impact at the national level, maybe you have to think European, because the big European players, they will have the huge impact at your country, but they need to have also a European solution. So it's a different type of engagement that we had with the different programs. The NDW, which is also fulfilling the National Access Point Service, took a big work also in promoting this European approach. They are very active also in the development of this European approach, and also so it was an easy job to implement it with the help of the NDW to push forward the DATEX to UVAR model, and to try to include it in the already running programs that are already taking place. They are thinking, and there's an option considering on what are the options to hosting the UVAR Box tool after the project. No commitments, but it's one of the options to do this, still to be decided based also on European governance that we are going to have. And they're already a little bit further. There's different projects and different programs already using these UVAR data and already interacting with service providers to experimenting and to collecting more insights on the use of the data, which is some of the aspects that we discussed just now, trying to understand from them, how are you going to use the data? What is the quality perception you have of this data? What type of tips do you give when we're digitizing? What can we take it for the next iteration of the digitization? What are your quality requirements? What do you look at? How do you translate it into your own system? All these type of questions is the next step after we, as UVAR Box is finalized. And it's already happening in the Netherlands already for quite some time. There was this project also financed by the CINEA, it's called Socrates 2.0, which was a kind of a start of that interaction with service providers also at international level. And the Netherlands took that further under this program. It's called VM Infra, which stands for Traffic Management Information and Route Guidance, a public-private cooperation at this level. In this program, the 15 low emission zones were already being digitized into DATEX 2, not exactly the one that we are using, but there is, it's not a big change that needs to be done. And they're already available via the NBW Open Data Portal. So everyone can already use it now, also the same as in Germany, more or less, because this is an open data portal. I know that in Germany, it's still in a kind of a private only for registered NEP users. 25 zero emission zones will also be available also in line with this program that is being done. So a bit different in terms of how a country coach can not disturb what's already happening, but try to add value and collect also insights to our own project. We collect a lot of information from the Netherlands. Yeah. So a plan for the next is to agree on a strategy for the UVAR Box tool management as a project, and as European Commission, what do we want to do with the tool, so that will give some principles also for the Netherlands and for other countries. So what can I do with the tool after the project is finished? I think it needs to be further promotion and adoption of the tool by different types of users, not just on the public side, but also on the private side that support cities in this digitization. I see someone here also in the room. We need to do the further development of the templates that Bart was talking about for the other types of UVARs, limited traffic zones, the pedestrian to park, specifically to the Dutch situation, which can be still for limited traffic zones a bit diverse. For parking, there is already a lot of work, and there's probably some easier collaboration and using of the DATEX tool for the parking. There's a lot of discussions and an initiative trying to get a grip on the quality management of the work that is being produced. Define what are the quality requirements, what are the principles, accuracy, timeliness, up to date, all these aspects that needs to be defined. And the national access point for mobility data is developing some work together with the cities and the concentrated cities in order to define, okay, what would be your role? What do you need to be doing in order to keep this data up to date? Because if it's not up to date, it's not valuable. It's easy to, the data I've heard someone saying, once we digitize this already updated, it's already outdated because it's just a moment of that time. So we have to indeed to create these processes, not us, but we think by the source. So together with the citizen, maybe by the lawmaker and the mayor should be the one using UVAR Box tool in order to make sure that that's really the truth, that kind of aspects that need to be implemented. So the Netherlands is already thinking about this. I want to give you a little bit of a glimpse of the work that is being done under that VM Infra project. We've set up a collaboration with this program in the Netherlands because they were already interacting with service providers, also part of our project scope. There are already 3 service providers. Here you have examples of 2 of them that have already using the UVAR DataX2 data for low emission zones, and they already integrated into their services. On the left side, you see some snapshots of the app of Flitsmeister, which in collaboration with B-Mobile, a Belgian company, they are already in production as we speak. This information is already being provided to their, I think, more than 1 million users in the Netherlands, based on this type of UVAR DataX data. The other one is Onderweg app, also a more national-oriented application, which uses different types of information that is being provided by our UVAR DataX2 and tailors to the way that they're using their information. Here on the left side, just to be an example, they are just using it for pre-trip information, which can be also be in car, but pre-trip. That's what they're using so far. On the right side, you can see some snapshots, at least was where it's already in on-trip information that is also necessary. So it's interesting to understand how do they use the data that is being promoted and translated into the services, and get the feedback from them on the quality, on the more ideas for improvement, what would be that their clients would be more interested and for improving the value of their services. If I may, before here we go, our project also, and I take my hat of country coaches and I go back to the interaction with service providers, which was also part of our UVAR Box. We used also the interactions with these 2 service providers to understand, as UVAR Box project, how to improve the access and the conditions of access for the UVAR data. What do they want to see? We not only with these 2, we also had from the beginning of the project, we created what we called a small group of multinationals, very known by you. I can name them: Here Technologies, TomTom International, Google Maps. We had contacts, B-Mobile also from the beginning, BMW, I thought also, and I hope I don't forget, and INRIX, of course. And together with them, we, from the beginning of the project, we presented the project, we promoted the goals and the objectives of the project, and we started to collect feedback from them for different results or progress results that we've been having in the project. The first ones were the draft models that were being provided by Work Package 1 for them to understand and to try to collect, is this something that you would be willing and able to use, interpret, and to integrate in your services? All that feedback is being provided to our project. And later in the project, we've invited them to experiment more and more with the data, in the chance or in the hope that they would, during our project lifetime, also to integrate into their own services so that we can learn even more as a project. In the end, only these 2 companies used the data that was provided from our project, but nevertheless, all the multinationals, they were very positive about the work that we are doing. We created an expectation, that a positive expectation, and they are really interested to collect in the form and in the results of our project. I can even say that, for example, here, TomTom and INRIX, there are companies who are very, very familiar with DataX2. So for them, it was not a big shock to see the slides of parts and the big difficult pictures. But a company like Google Maps has their own processes, their own ways of digitizing and collecting information. I can say that we were able to trigger them to think differently about, and they are already considering and contacting us to re-engineering their roadmaps, try to understand, to include also some knowledge of DataX2 into their engineering teams. So that gives hopes that the project and the results that we have will have huger impacts based on, for example, the adoption of this data by Google Maps. So that's something, a very positive result of our projects, at least from the knowledge that I have on the different involvements of these kind of companies in our this kind of projects. I want to highlight 3 different examples of non-multinational companies. Well, actually multinationals, but more on a startup level. that also are planning, and there were also very positive reactions to the work that we're doing, and they are very eager and wanting to have the data and the results of our project. So I have 3 examples of different types of use of the data that we're going to use for different types of usage. The first one is clearly is a startup company which is supporting net zero logistic operations. I really liked this this term. These are companies, and Pedro is also here in the room. And these are logistic companies who want to operate in a zero carbon emission level. And of course, they want to have also this type of, specifically the low emission zones, so that clearly can support them to do the compliance check on all their operations, and if they are really a zero emission company. Another one is Campy. Campy is a small Dutch, well, small, but European-wide also service provider specialized for camper vans. And they want to, of course, inform their users on all the different routes and trips and LEZ compliant trips for camper vans, a specific type of specific group, but they really liked the work that we're doing, and they really want us to provide for all Europe everything, so that they can also offer to their all Europe. The example of this morning from Bart, we didn't make any, we didn't arrange it, but it's exactly the example. This is the camping site in Amsterdam, where you have a special permit as if you're a camper van in order to cross through the whole Amsterdam just to get which is I'm very happy that Campy provided also these slides. And the last one is the one that we've been also some of us of our group is from IN Group. IN Group is a French company supporting the French government in the emission and the operation of the CITRE. So the stickers that you as a user of, if you want to visit a French city, you would have to identify your car or your vehicle with what type of environment or emission do you have. So that's IN Group, and they are working together with us in the UVAR Exchange, another project also sponsored by the DigiMove and European Parliament. And they are developing a solution that would support the driver, but also the cities in the compliance assessment and also enforcement of the low emission zone. So coming back to a little bit to how good is the data in order to set up some liabilities on it. Well, there's a nice case in UVAR Exchange where we are already exploring that, which is related also to fines. This was my last slide. Thank you, Nicholas. And I'm open for some questions related with this. I think it was my last. Yes.
Thank you, Nuno. We're running out of time, but if there is any burning question, feel free to raise your hand. If not, we will go on. But we only have. So Lucy will conclude on the on the country coaches presentation, and then we only have the presentation on the sustainability process of the UVAR Box project, which is the most interesting. So stay until the end. Yeah, we don't have much more to say. So Lucy, can you share your screen? Thank you.
Okay. Other member states, as I said, our project focused on the 5 member states, but we also reached out as far as was possible to other member states, and very successful in terms of the workshop attendance and the questionnaires. And in Portugal, Lisbon has digitized their LEZ and LTZ with the help of ARMIS, and during a virtual meeting with ARMIS, and the shapefile were emailed. And also beyond that, Barcelona in Spain and Riga in Latvia have also been given access and expressing interest. There is much more interest from cities expressed than actually getting their hands on the data. So wrap up the data creation target has been met, and more than met. 100% and 100% of all current Austria, Belgian, German, and Dutch LEZs are digitized. The total number of German LEZs is lower, but that's because some of the individual ones have been combined into a larger one, and 2 LEZs have been discontinued. For Italy, there were 196 LEZs digitized, but 2 we have unpublished because although through the regional legislation or agreement, they should have a low emission zone, we couldn't find any confirmation on the city website. So in terms of being sure, we just unpublished that. So Italy published 30 more LEZs than were in place in the beginning of the project, but not all current LEZs. However, the number of LEZs in Europe, in the EU, has increased by 40% since we started the project. So it isn't 80% of the LEZs in Europe, and there are a lot more in France and Spain since we started. But importantly, as opposed to also the data collation, there's been a dialogue started with many cities and organizations and the national ministries, which is really key and to taking on what Martin will talk about later. Just a bit of wrap up, it was often really difficult to get data directly from cities, even if they were interested. Some of the challenges I'll mention later. The data was often digitized with the CCs. The Germans took the maps from the original collation that was already in place. Italian ministries thankfully had the municipal boundaries to use, and the Dutch managed to persuade the national program to use DataX. So all different approaches, and that'll be also relevant for the other countries outside R5. Some of the data was city validated and others had UVAR box validation and checks, which also, as you heard in Austria, could identify errors. We also have many parking schemes for Austria and a number of traffic limited zones and 1 emerging urban tolling. And outside our focus at member states. Some of the challenges you've heard about today, just summarizing them. The lack of resources of cities is a key issue echoed from all country coaches. The project timescales were also a challenge in terms of getting the cities themselves to digitize. Lack of skills, and whilst UVAR Box tool helps with this, it's still an issue, and the issues differ between small and big cities. Cities need to understand the need to digitize and also the benefit to them, which needs to be disseminated, but also being able to prioritize this work because there's a large amount of work on their plate. What was frustrating is the regions could and should be important actors and data collators and creators. But especially in Germany and Italy, this wasn't possible. And particularly in Italy, it's very frustrating. And hopefully the ministry can help that process to be more open. Identifying the person in the department is difficult, and also who feels responsible for doing it in the future. The huge impact from existing structured and semi-structured data activities was seen versus when it doesn't happen. And when they do exist, the issue of coordinating them. Concern of authorities about releasing the digitized data has been discussed, and also cities' computer and IT systems. Updates and maintenance was issued, and I'll go on now to Martin, who's going to cover that. I'm seeing from Mike Pincars that France is a very important country missing. When we started in 2019, there weren't any LEZs in France, and the 5 member states covered the 80%. I think with the increase in Italy probably counteracts the increase in France, so we probably still have covered 80% of the LEZs within the EU. But as I said, there is more to do on this. Service providers have been great and achieving the impossible. There is a virtuous circle with the service providers. If the service providers use the data, there is increased benefit to the authorities, and they can see the advantages that could be undertaken do happen. And as Nuno said, we are continuing this dialogue after this conference. Those dialogues that have started are key to making things happen. And we have an extremely dedicated group of country coaches. So many thanks to them. Now I'll shut up, Manon.
No worries. Thank you very much, Lucy. Just about France, we had some contact with the National Access Point, and they are aware of the project and the fact that it will be taken over afterwards, hopefully within the NAPCOR initiative. Okay, there is one question. Please, Susan.
Yeah, well, I have three very, very quick questions, and I think the second and third will probably be addressed by Martin in the next session. So the first relates to the fact that I think we all agree that digitization is not a one-off event. It's an ongoing process. We've discussed that quite a lot today. So I want to understand from a resource perspective and a technical perspective in relation to the actual tool itself, what that implies. I mean, once a scheme has already been put through the tool, I mean, if that scheme is updated, you know, the boundaries change, the exemptions change, what does that mean for public authority? So that irrespective of whether the scheme is digitized in-house or it's outsourced, what are the technical resource requirements? The second question is, has the project considered integrating the tool in the design phase of a scheme? Because it's far, I think it's far more efficient to integrate that into the development of the scheme and all the information and communication activities that are planned in the development of the UVAR scheme. So is that been considered in, I don't know, maybe in the work package that Martin's going to present? And the third question, I'm not sure we'll get an answer to this today, but it's just occurred to me that the UVAR box has digitized many schemes. So there is now a data file. So are these schemes now subject to the RTTI regulation? Because the regulation, as we had earlier on, only, you know, there is an obligation on public authorities to upload that, or to digitize the UVAR scheme, put it into the NAP if it exists in a digital format already. And a lot of digitization work has been done within this project. So if the answer to that is yes, then there is now an obligation on the public authorities that have been involved in this project to make sure that file is in the NAP and it's maintained, it's updated should that scheme change. Difficult question, Martin.
No.
Isn't that a good transition to Martin's presentation? So then maybe, Martin, can you start your presentation? You probably provide answers to them now.
I'm not sure. Good afternoon. Yeah.
Maybe not to share the screen.
Fine.
You just need to move the camera a little bit, but everything else is cool.
So, okay.
Great, thanks.
Yeah, I will stand fixed here. I will not move around. So, good afternoon. Yeah, the future update. A lot have been already discussed, so it's more or less a repetition of what we discussed. It will be also maybe here the one or other answer in addition, but I think a lot of the topics have been already addressed here, because the questions are always looking around, okay, what's happening now with data? What does that mean for a city? What does that mean for a national authority? Just for those that don't know me, I'm working at Austriatech. That sounds very technical, but in fact, we are federal agency of the Austrian Climate Ministry. That means I'm more from the authority side than from the technical side. we have seen, and that's the most important thing, yeah, UVAR Box, the project has delivered, yeah. And during today, we have seen, I would say, 3 main outcomes, and those are crucial to focus at. The first one is the tool itself. Yes, there is a tool, and what we see, this tool helps us. This tool helps us to create our data. Without the tool, it's really a challenge to extract the data out of existing databases with all these consolidation problems. We have already mentioned the different reference systems. Also that popped up in the discussion. So we really see GIS systems in place. Data is there, but it's hardly usable. It's not harmonized. It's not easily usable on a European market. So we also use the tool, and I mentioned that as well, to validate what is in our GIS systems. Yeah. So in Austria, we found 3 errors in our GIS system. It's not that much, but at least we found, okay, not everything is fine. What is already existing today on the public side? Yeah. And us in Austria, we are here on a safe side. We have a GIS system for the transport sector for whole Austria. It's a national system which is driven by the cities, by the authorities. Yeah. And we say these are the most valid data. No, it's not. There are still errors inside. Yeah. So that helps us there. The UVAR Box helps us really to provide the data in one common format. DATEX2 version 3, easily readable. Now for those, if you learn that language, then you understand it. And if you're going from the one to the other country, you understand the language, you know how to get this data. And very important, we had a lot of discussions. This tool helped us to have the discussions, not only from our side as a consortium with the single partners, but also the partners between themselves. Cities started to discuss, oh, how you're doing this, how you're doing that. So the tool itself, it's also a kind of communication mean, because when using the tool, they need to discuss, how have you done this for that specific overview? Yeah. So that's important for me, just to wrap up what we have, because then we can discuss how to deal with those things further. We have the data model, which is also very crucial. Yeah, we have DATEX2 version 3.3. I'm never sure about the version number.
You can say now 3.3.
Thank you. We know that a lot of authorities are still using previous versions. And now we have, and that means that also the language is slightly different. It has a slightly different slang. And also in Austria, I don't always understand the Swiss or the Germans, and vice versa. So that means we are speaking one by one the same language. That's also very, very good. And that's important for us, because then it's also easily understandable for a third party. Okay, I understand this kind of data. And we have data. We have created data, we have delivered. Lucy and the country coaches have just shown also all the figures. And this data raises awareness. And that's also good. They are used in navigation tools, or are going to be used in navigation tools. So that means data has a usage. And that's a very important sentence also towards authorities. Yeah. We have seen the open data portal in Austria, data.gv.at. The open data portal, we have 260 data sets there dealing with mobility. 60 of them had been downloaded so far by third parties. That means we are creating data and nobody uses them. And that's also a huge topic for authorities. Okay, we have to create data, we have to publish data. Nobody is using this kind of data. Here we have a use case. We see there's an interest. We want to get this data. We are fulfilling the legal requirements, if they are set now in the SDG, or if they are set by the ITS directive. it's important. Authorities always want to fulfill the requirements. Okay, if I enter my data into the tool, then I'm on the safe side. I'm fulfilling the requirements. That's also a very, very important statement. So I need to provide the data in DATEX2 or any compliant format. What does that mean? Enter the data in the tool and you are fine. Great, done, check. It sounds easy, but cities are usually interested in fulfilling the legislation, yeah? They're complaining against it, especially also then towards the national authorities, but we are identifying ways to solve that. And we also see that service providers are contacting individual cities, and we saw that all through the different countries, yeah? They're saying, we are interested in your data. Oh, in what format? Yeah, of course, in my format. No, we have one format. This is DATEX2. That means it's easy for the city. We have one data set, discrimination-free, that's always the big word, also on European level, we can deliver. And service providers can access UVAR data, I now say at one place. They are not interested, I guess, to contact all the different cities. Ideally, it would be one place in Europe, one place on the whole globe, where all this data is accessible. That's sometimes a little bit difficult with national authorities. They say, okay, it's my data that need to be stored within Austria. I know that, yeah. Okay, it's a general rule. Austrian data needs to be accessible in Austria. Also in Germany, German data is accessible via the mobility. So that's more or less the framework. The good thing is you have delivered those three elements. What are now the next steps? And Nuno already addressed that. What to do now with the tool? The tool itself, and Lucy also mentioned that we have very different size of cities, of authorities responsible for UVARs. And I personally, I see UVARs bigger. I would like to delete the U in the UVARs because it's about access regulations. In the Alpine region, in natural areas, we will start also to make access regulations, which is not necessarily a city. So that means if we have such a tool, we have very small cities in Austria. I think the smallest city has 73 inhabitants, something like that, and there's still a city. And they even have an UVAR. They have a pedestrian somewhere. Yeah? I know that. It's not digitized. It's not available, I guess. I don't know, Alexander. But anyhow, we need to support them. They have for sure no resources to deal with that. They expect a tool somewhere hosted. If I look into big cities, Berlin, Amsterdam, Vienna, for sure, I have my IT system, the tool is with me. Both things have advantages and disadvantages. I will not go through them, yeah? You can read them and the report will be as well public available, I'm quite sure about that. The big point is we also will need to update both the model, the DATEX2 model, as well as the tool itself. If it's not public available and everybody will start updating, then it will be not one tool. It will be, again, not the one and same format going to the outside world. So at the end, we need to have a clever maintenance established. How to do that? And that's really the big question we need to deal with. And here I'm coming to the European level. On the European level, we have now started with 5 countries, sorry. It's 5 countries. We already got the comment. We are lacking of France. We're lacking of Spain, Portugal. We're lacking of a lot of additional countries. And in fact, more or less all countries, all bigger cities have UVARs. So we need to enlarge that to other member states, to other countries. Enlarging that means they also need to get training. We will get new UVAR schemes to be integrated into the tool. Anyhow, there is action needed. It will not be just, and now it happens, because the tool is not prepared. It works well for 5 countries. I'm quite sure that additions, adoptions, upgrades are needed. So we need to set up support programs and guidelines also for using the tool itself on a European level, and you will see that also on a national level. Yeah, because also on a member state level, we need to support cities, we need to support authorities. The upgrade of the UVAR Box tool is needed, of course, also to include all these new regional specialities to ensure the sustainable operation and maintenance of the UVAR Box tool. And what would be good, at least from my point of view, we're now looking on the data. We have the first set of data, and I still call it a test set of data. Even it was collected by the country coaches, it was integrated, but it's now there. It's already some weeks and months old. It's still a test set. It is a correct test set. It's the best we could do. You will not identify, okay, that's something that they had an idea of a pedestrian zone in Vienna. No, it is what we have got for the moment. But to divide data in between tested data and finally validated data, it would be nice if we have a kind of authority seal on this checked and validated data, where the authority itself says, okay, this kind of data, that's the most crucial one. In a city center, it's more important to update data regularly than in some peripheral areas. To say, okay, this is authority proof, that's authority checked. So to have a kind of authority seal for data, which might help also service providers at the end to identify, first of all, I can trust this kind of data because it's authority sealed. And on the other hand, I know, okay, this might be not 100% correct. That's something what really would help us, but that's not something what can be done by member state alone. I think here this should be really a European initiative going into this direction. And when we have this authority seal, then there might be, and that's a future step. It's not, if you have the authority seal, then you go the next step immediately. Then we could think about how can we provide with our kind of data, which is still information, and we add that in future also for automated driving functions. How can we use it really in a machine-to-machine interaction? And we see a lot of efforts put in the automation initiatives, and we see the data, and we see the problems authorities have. I'm quite sure not all my data is 100% correct. I'm not able to update everything each hour, each day, each week, each month. So then we need to divide this kind of data in high quality data, medium and low quality data, and to make UVAR data something as legal valid data. I can tell you, and I have here MITRE, Management of Electronic Traffic Regulations. It's a SEDAR initiative as well, yeah, where they are looking how can we make data also as a kind of publication, official publication of a regulation, something which goes in parallel. At the moment, still the traffic sign, the world traffic sign, that's the official publication of a traffic regulation data. It's information. And I know that in Norway, they are not discussing in that direction. I know that also in the Netherlands and Belgium, there are discussions. I, of course, know, because I'm driving also this discussion in Austria. we need to come to the next step, because if that's legal valid, then also a service provider at the end will say, okay, I need to trust this data. We also have identified within with our UVAR data, we are providing the data for very immediate regulations, saying, okay, in 2 days, we are closing this part. The service provider is saying, in 2 days, we are not able to integrate that. It's only information. If it has a kind of authority seal, yes, it's information, but it's legal valid. But I'm not so much speaking only on the European level, because in fact, the speech was on the national level. On the national level, there's a lot to do. And the most important thing is the very first point. The member states need to ensure that cities and municipalities digitize and maintain UVAR data. It's an easy sentence written. It's very difficult because there's a lot behind. Usually, I remember the very first days with the very first delegated regulation under the ITS directive, going to the city of Vienna and saying, look, we need this kind of data. Great. So the member state will pay me for this kind of data. Then we will deliver. So that means creation of data costs money. We need to have, on the one hand, we need to have the incentives, which is not necessarily only money. Yeah? The incentives is you need to serve your citizens. That means we need to have national strategies. We are, and I know that looking to Germany, looking to the Netherlands, looking to Austria, we are very much now working on these national strategies for this digital transformation of the mobility system. This is nothing what a member state will do for its own. It needs to be in a dialogue together with the cities, with the other authorities. Yeah, it can be done. Yeah, it's not directly then an obligation to deliver immediately, but this dialogue is in many countries not existing, including Austria. We are starting with this dialogue, but usually we have the national level and the city is doing, I'm responsible for the city. No, we need to work together. Then we need to enable the national access point and the single digital gateways to provide access to this kind of UVAR data. That means also that we have just providing access does not help. We also need to have common descriptions of data sets called metadata. Metadata means a description. Metadata is data about data sets. Metadata is describing what is the content, how does it look like, what is covered, and so on. And in fact, this goes also a little bit together with what Susanna previously said. What is meant by UVAR in detail? What is included? That's always also the problem, and here NAPCOR is also working on. If you're looking to the delegated regulations, you have nice headers. And what is in detail meant with that? What is parking? What is a parking space? Yeah, I think these definitions, this common understanding, that's something what is currently undertaken with the NAPCOR. And they are also, of course, also now discussing what is meant with UVARs. What is with these zonal restrictions? Because I think the word UVAR itself is not in the delegated regulations. They are looking on these zonal elements. What is meant by that? And here, that's something where the member states should really sit together and to define that we have a common understanding on between the member states and then also on the European level. We need to have the rules for the usage of UVAR data. I'm just mentioning that. Who owns this data? Who is the data owner? What is allowed to be done with the data? What are the musts? And so on. We need to set up the validation procedures as an important building block for the sustainable data maintenance. So not just setting up on the one hand, the data, but also how to validate the correctness of data. That's also something what NAPCOR is currently working at as a very important point. The harmonization of UVAR schemes, I know Lucy will immediately raise her hand. We can't harmonize UVAR schemes. We're discussing that. That does not mean that it will be the one and only scheme, but we are discussing that to get them a little bit together, that we avoid that each city is doing it completely differently, to provide a kind of framework how to set up UVAR schemes to make it easier, not only easier for the citizens or for the travelers. Even within Austria, I sometimes really have the problem, what does that mean to me? Am I allowed to park or not? Am I allowed to enter or not? How to do things, yeah? I think here we will need a kind of harmonization. We need the strategies for ensuring technical expertise. We know, especially in the cities, the bigger are well equipped, but the smaller cities, technology, oh my God. That means we really need to have training. We need to have understanding. Yes, IT, it's not a bad word. It helps you, yeah. And that's something where we really have a problem, and that needs to be done on a national level. We need to strengthen the collaboration with the service providers, and I already mentioned clarifying the data ownership. Last but not least, I think that's really my last slide, because that's also very important for the European Commission, the SAMP guidelines. Digitalization, it's like, yes, it's already part of the SAMP guidelines. Yeah. I think this awareness and the usage of the guide documents on UVARs, that's really low. So we need to hire the usage of this guidance to really have a good practice UVARs implementations. We should invest in the technical expertise. I know it's DATEX 2 because that's for us important. Using the tool, you at least need to have a minimum knowledge about DATEX 2. Having no knowledge at all, no knowledge about technology at all, it will become difficult. So we need to have at least some expertise also within the cities. We need to have the establishment of a process for the data management, not only for the creation, but very important for validation and maintenance. And there is a proposal also to make the DATEX 2 model, that this UVAR data and DATEX 2 model should be included in the updated SAMP guidelines, so that really all the regulations and communications work together, that it's easy understandable, because usually authorities start, okay, I have this, I have that, I have that, I have that. How does that fit together? If you have the cross-references, then it's easy. And you say, I know how all the things fit together. That is easing also our work now as supporters of cities and authorities. With this, I'm hopefully at the end. Yes.
Thank you, Martin.
Thank you.
I guess we had discussions and questions before, so considering we already have 30 minutes delay, maybe we can conclude. And if you have any question, you have Martin contact. If you don't, please come and talk to him. Because we have to conclude, and I just would like to mention 3 events that we have to talk about just before closing.
While Anna's doing that, could I just state that the advantages of using DATEX for cities is really quite advantageous if they have that message, and that the DATEX requirements are going to be Susanna's comment about making cities aware of it in their planning, the DATEX is going to be included in the REVEAL guidance. The REVEAL is the other EU UVAR project.
Lucy, let me talk, please. All right, so just quickly, the single digital gateway we already mentioned because Bart mentioned it at the beginning of the presentations. We had a quick cooperation with them, but that is still important to mention. And then you have to be aware of other projects around the UVARs. So 2 of them have final events very soon, and that's why I need to mention them. It's REVEAL and UVAR Exchange, but I'll start with quickly mentioning Dynaccessibility for CE. Dynaccessibility for CE is funded by the Interreg Central Europe program. It finished in May 2022, but very important, it will still publish an annex to the STAMP topic guide on UVARs that, well, Martin mentioned just the STAMP. So check out Dynaccessibility for CE because they will provide relevant content for UVARs. The other project is the REVEAL project. So the REVEAL project is the largest project on UVARs. It will end in December this year. And it will have its final conference in November in London, 8-9 November. So also check the REVEAL website. And the last one is UVAR Exchange, of which we have a very good representative here in the room, and which also has the final workshop on 18th of October in our offices here. So don't miss it and check out the UVAR Box, UVAR Exchange website because it's a common website. That's it. Also visit our website here, uvarbox.eu, because you can now find on our website our final brochure that basically summarizes all the content that we have delivered. A very quick summary in 20 pages of all that was said now in 3 hours. Yeah, and then visit our website and our social media accounts and contact us if you have any questions. Thank you very much for attending. I'm sorry for the delay.